Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening, everyone. I am here tonight with Jake St. John, a gentleman who spends his nights in a cabin on the edge of the woods. Jake, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing quite well. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Let's begin this journey together. I'd like to ask you the following question. What is poetry?
I've always thought that poetry was truth. It was honesty. It was something that when whoever the reader or the listener of the poem would be, they can relate to it in some way. I think overall, as long as the poem is honest, that's what poetry is. It's just an honest snapshot of life.
Oh, very nice. An honest snapshot of life. Why, and this is a little nuance in terms of the first question, why is it important to us?
I think it tells you what poetry, when poetry's honest, you know what's going on in the world. It's like the real newspaper, especially if you're reading contemporary poetry and you're reading poetry as it happens in the world. You're getting a feeling of the pulse of whatever culture the poem's coming from. So you it's kind of the pulse of the world in a way, if you want to really know what's going on.
Again, that's nice. I like that. The pulse of the world. Oh, Jake.
Thank you.
You're incredible already. What are some of the predominant themes of your work?
Well, I think early on it was just kind of like the road, the openness, searching and longing and looking for something. The pictures of every day, like things that you walk by, you don't pay attention to, a flower growing out of a stop sign, a piece of newspaper flowing down the street, things like that. And then with my last book that I did, A Night Full of Diamonds, it was more love poems, nature poems. Gary Snyder, Pablo Neruda had a dance or something like that, and just kind of nature and life and living and sadness and happiness and just kind of the process of growing each day.
All right, very nice. How does a poem begin for you, with an idea, a form, or an image?
Usually when a poem starts coming to me, I'll either get a word that kind of is echoing around in my head. It might be a word, it might be a phrase, and it's constantly in a voice, and I'm hearing the cadence, and I'm hearing everything that's going around, and then I'll start getting an image, and a couple more words might come, and then I'll start jotting them down in a notebook, and then as I'm jotting them down, I'm hearing more and more words that it's almost like somebody reading a poem to me in my head, and it kind of, the words jump around, dance around, and I try to get them all out. And sometimes I might have 2 or 3 poems that way. Sometimes it might not even end up being one poem, but it usually always starts with a word or a phrase kind of entering my mind at some point.
Well, please share a poem.
All right. This poem is The Grim Reaper is My Best Friend. The Grim Reaper is my best friend. He walks with me every day. Sometimes down the sidewalk and into work. Sometimes into the woods alone we'll go. We sit and talk philosophy and books. His favorite author is a prick and mine is a fraud. I don't stop for lunch, but he'll pause and eat a ham sandwich. He's kind enough to pour me a drink at any time of day. And in the morning, we drink black coffee together while laughing at the news. That was The Grim Reaper is my best friend. Thank you.
I like that poem, and I liked it when I had first had the opportunity to read it. It reminded me of a scene in that movie, The Seventh Seal, by Ingmar Bergman, when Death was sitting there with the I guess the protagonist, and they were playing chess, I believe it was.
Oh wow!
Yeah, very powerful movie and a very powerful poem. I mean,
thank you.
I really enjoyed that very, very much. Very, very much. It reminded me of work that I write myself. So, very nice, very nice. Now, all great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of yours, and what makes them great in your eyes?
I think my early influences, when I was in college and I really decided to start investing myself in poetry, the earliest poet that I knew of was Jim Morrison, which I know a lot of guys reference Jim, and it was kind of, I got into Jim, I got into his music, I got into his words, and then reading documentaries about Jim, or reading biographies rather, I apologize, of Jim, I discovered like Jack Kerouac, the Beat Generation, Gary Snyder. So I was able to like read about them and learn, and then read from learning about them, learning about other poets, and then it kind of took its way from there up until I would say the biggest influence on me was this gentleman Tom Weigel from New London, who he was at my very first poetry reading, and he ran a poetry scene in New London, Connecticut, and he kind of took me under his wing, and he taught me about poetry, like what poems that I was writing, what poems that I wrote needed to be revised, why they needed to be, how I could do it, things like that, what poets to read because of this poem. So he really opened me up to many New York poets, and it was because of Tom, I think, that I really understood the craftsmanship and the real appreciation of what poetry really is. He was one of the biggest influences on me. I mean, there's so many other ones, but.
Wow, very nice. You know, prior to college, was there an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
Yeah, I mean, in high school, there was a group of us, like we'd write rap songs, and Tupac Shakur was another, besides Jim Morrison. Tupac was another poet that, like, the language that he was using, it was just like, you didn't hear anything that sounded the same as Tupac. Like he was just distinct. He was honest. It was like watching the news. It was, so Tupac definitely was early, like how to use poetry, how to use words as power.
Now, do you also come from a literary background?
I do. I've always enjoyed reading, yes.
What about in your family? Anybody else a writer?
No. My brother used to, when we were younger, he would dabble here and there, but it's pretty much just me.
All right. You know, when you think about a poem and you think about the creation of it, and you think about it as being potentially a cake that's being baked, what do you view as being some of the most prevalent ingredients that go into baking a poem?
First, you need to, all the ingredients need to be honest. They need to be specific. They need to be your truth. They need to have that substance. But then You, like, if you are baking a poetry cake, you got to mix it, you got to edit it, you got to revise it, you got to keep turning it over, churning it, whipping it up, make sure everything that's in the poem is earning its keep, whether it's the proper words, the line breaks, stanzas, is it going to flow together. So there's a little bit of everything, but I think the most important part of getting that final poetry cake is being honest enough to know that you need to revise your poem. You need to work on it. It's like no one's going to write the perfect poem in one sitting. God bless you if you do, but it always takes more than one get-go at it.
Now, you've mentioned honesty and being honest a number of times. That's really important to you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, when one of the things that Tom talked to me about, like growing up in poetry, he would tell me all the time that you can't, if you're writing a haiku, like there's haiku moments in the world, you can't sit down and make up a haiku because it takes it's not genuine. It might be an okay poem, but there's no heart to it. It's something that you picked up and it wasn't life as you saw it happen. So I kind of always wanted to make sure that when I was writing, it was always honest. It was always truth involved in the process. I think if someone's gonna take the time to read your work and you're gonna bleed onto the page, at least make sure you're bleeding the right message and you're bleeding your own blood.
All right, very profound. Please share another piece.
All right. This one is In Your Absence. I spend my minutes looking towards the moon, a waning crescent, a sliver in the night. You there in the north woods and me here in the hills of my birth. I think you below maritime stars, eyes lit like a field of mayflowers. I stand by my pit of fire, flames kissing the night as I would your neck, my heart in your hands. One defends and the other conquers. You have conquered all of me. I lay myself down before you like a vast tilled field ready to be sown. You have dug your fingers into the meadows of my heart. You've planted your seeds. Come fall, we'll harvest grain. Thank you. That's In Your Absence.
In Your Absence. Wow. Do you think you were meant to be a poet, Jake?
I do in a way think you either are a poet or you're not.
Okay. Talk about that.
I think you can definitely it's almost a way of seeing, a way of understanding, not just kind of seeing things just a little askew, things that you kind of see things just slightly different than everybody else. And I think you can work and learn and craft your words, but I think writing a poem is more than just getting pretty words on a paper. I think there's a genuine spirit in the words, a spirit, like there's something connected where it gives it substance. The poem should have soul. It should speak to whoever's reading it. And I think if you're missing that, I think it comes across when people get their eyes on it.
Wow. You could be my twin brother because I believe the same thing.
Right on, man.
Maybe we are twins. You never know. Poets hail from all over the world. Where do you hail from?
Well, I grew up on my grandfather's farm in Griswold, Connecticut, and then I went cross country after I graduated college, and then came back and spent a good chunk of my 20s and 30s in London, Connecticut, and now I'm in Colchester, Connecticut. So I've been pretty much New England my whole life.
How do you think that's affected your writing?
I think, honestly, once I learned, and it kind of sounds cliche, but once I learned about Jack Kerouac and when I read On the Road, it changed my life. I know I'm probably like the 300 millionth person to say that, but it changed my life. But then it wasn't just the book. It was like when I was young, I could look at the horizon and I could see the sunset, and it would set over the town that I grew up in. And I wanted to go farther. I wanted to see something different. I didn't want to stay. I didn't want my feet in the same place. And I was very angsty. I was very like cooped up, feeling caged up. So I wanted to travel. And then when I read On the Road and then read about Jack's background, he grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, a mill town. He's French-Canadian. So there was just like similarities where you kind of grasp on to authors and stories that kind of represent things that you either admire or it was one of the few novels where Meme and Mamere were that I read growing up, that I saw that, and I had a Meme and I had a Pepe, so reading another French-Canadian author was kind of interesting, and I grew up in a similar. Jewett City was a mill town, lot of French-Canadians, so it was just kind of finding somebody that had similar feelings of angst in a similar situation, and they were able to get out, and the story doesn't end well, but they were able to get out of the town that their parents, their family was from in a way. So that was something that got to me when I was younger. That was how I kind of got into Jack.
Oh, wow, very nice. Please share another poem.
This poem is Overcast. The sky is heavy with gloom. It seems to rest its burdens on my back. There's no room to move around, and I know it's all eternal. There's no way to escape. It'll always be there. So I continue moving along like these clouds, and I know all seconds are temporary, and even now, they're gone. Thank you. That's Overcast.
Wow. Let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back. I'm here with the one and only Jake St. John. He's sharing his work. I've got a question for you, Jake.
Yep.
Okay. And it includes the word honesty, to be quite honest. No pun intended. They say that to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, artists. I think emerges naturally from your work.
I agree with that. I think comedians are very similar to poets, giving you get the same kind of impact on the artist and society. I think where I'm with the work, what I'm trying to say, I feel like it comes pretty naturally, and it comes out pretty honest. And then there's always the image that the words are forming, so you can always go back and mold it and get the image that you originally saw, the honest vision, and you can tighten things up and make sure that that vision is what the reader will get, or hopefully.
Now, do you think that someone could be a poet if they don't feel strong emotions? could be called a poet?
I think so. I mean, there's so many different types of poetry that somebody not feeling emotion, somebody that is kind of distant. I mean, that's all. That's part of the world too. So getting the input from somebody that feels that way. I mean, what's the motivating factor for them? Why aren't they feeling a connection to anything? What role do we play in that situation? Do we play a role in that situation? So I think somebody that doesn't feel emotionally connected or emotional about anything, I think their opinion is definitely something that we can learn from.
All right. Please share another poem.
This poem is The Descent. I write my sadness on the wings of birds burning in the sun. Scorched feathers in flight break apart. Trails of soot streak the sky of blue. I watch the ashes catch the wind and hope in the sunlight they find you, falling softly upon your head, so you'll know that I was once there with you. That's The Descent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You know, some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it, while others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on it?
All right, so it's pretty awesome that you asked that, because earlier today I was chatting with Todd Cirillo, the New Orleans poet.
Yeah.
And
I know Todd.
Todd. God bless Todd. I love that dude.
Yeah, he's a good man.
So he was the one with the last book that I got published, Night Full of Diamonds. He went through, he edited, we worked together pretty tightly on it. So I'm very grateful to Todd and John Greiner. They both did that. But I was talking with Todd today. I found an old poem, and I sent it to him. And I said, hey, I just came across this. Something I thought you might appreciate it, you might like it, something like that. And I think it was the date that I had on it was 2013. And so when I sent it to Todd, he said, do you want suggestions, or are you just sending me the poem? And I'm always open up to suggestions. And we were talking, and like, poems evolve. John Landry taught me that. Like, it doesn't matter how many times you get a poem published, that poem is always breathing. It's always growing. So you might get that poem published in 3 different places, and you might have 3 different variations of the poem. It might be a word here or there. Maybe you have a little bit of figurative language touched, and maybe something got tightened up. But or maybe you just have a completely different poem. So I think poems are always poems are always growing. They're always evolving, editing or revising. I just can't tell you how much that should play in getting the perfect poem out. Like, a lot of people get caught on first thought, best thought, and you can have that philosophy, but your first thought, best thought, it can still be there, but you can tighten up the words so that you can get that best first thought clean, so that every reader knows what your first thought, best thought was. So absolutely, to me, poems are always growing. They're always living and breathing and changing, and that's my view on that.
Yeah, I can tell you feel passionately about that. That's so great. Does writing itself, does it energize or exhaust you?
I think both. When it's very when I get into a project, I'll get into, like, I'll start a project, and then I'll get two or three related projects kind of going, and I'm full speed ahead. Like, I don't want to rest. I don't want to stop. Like, I have this end goal. I want to get these 15 poems together for this book, and I'm just going to work until this is done, and I want to think about some cover art, and I'm focused, and there's no rest, and I'm ready to go. And then, like, once it's almost like when when these projects that I do, with poetry, as I'm working on them and going crazy, editing, revising, writing, changing, scrapping, changing this, doing this, it's like putting a puzzle together. So when that, when you tweak that last word in that final poem in the collection, it's like that last puzzle piece going in, and then you see the picture, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, now I'm spent. I am done after doing that, and your gas tank's empty, and you got to refill it after that. So it keeps me going, but then once the going's done, then I am spent for a bit.
Right, I understand. In the same vein of a question, what do you view as being the most difficult part of your artistic process?
I think the most difficult part for me is I like to write, but I don't like sitting down and forcing myself to write. So the position that I'm in now, like after the last book came out, I've kind of been focused on that, trying to plug that, and I haven't really been writing too much. But at the same time, refilling the gas tanks, and the tough part for me is to not feel like I'm a failed writer because I'm not getting anything on paper. When I was younger, I used to think if I wasn't writing something every day that was garbage, and like what's the point? And now I've realized that Kay McDonough stopped by my house a while back, and we were chatting, and I told her about how I kind of told her I had writer's block, which I don't know that poets have that. I think it's just a refilling. And so I told her, I was like, I'm stressed that I haven't written anything in a while. And she was like, you got a lot of changes in your life right now. Like you're a father now, and you have other things. So you just put out this book. Now your gas tank's empty. Now you got to live, you got to breathe, and gradually fill it up. And then when your gas tank's full, then that's when the poems will come. So I've seen it's kind of cyclical each year, where there's different phases where I'll get a lot of work done in a short amount of time, and then kind of go dry for a little bit while I'm submitting and crafting, and then a couple months later I'll come again in a big flurry.
Share another poem.
All right. I'll read the title poem from Night Full of Diamonds. Night Full of Diamonds. Dipping fingers into sea of stars, arms outstretched, radiating visage of desire, coiled galaxies in your eyes, and me, here, fire-kissed and drowning in the shadow of trees. That's the title poem, Night Full of Diamonds. Thank you.
Let's talk about Night Full of Diamonds. It was published in 2021. It's just recently published, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. A couple months ago.
Where is it available?
Right now it's available on Amazon from Whiskey City Press. It's Night Full of Diamonds is up there. Lost City Highway is up there. It's available from Amazon.
Now, writing that book, what did you learn about yourself writing that particular book, A Night Full of Diamonds?
So when I was writing that book, I was in the I was at the end of a divorce. I was living back home in that cabin, spending most of my nights in that cabin by the campfire.
Right.
There's the pandemic was just beginning, after about 8-9 months, the pandemic was setting in. So there was a lot of time just by myself. Nobody else to talk about, nobody else to see. I was starting a new relationship. So a lot of the poems, the majority of these poems were during the early points of the relationship, me sending poems to her, and then they began adding up. And so this is kind of like an account of who I was, learning that being alone is a good thing. Being alone with your own thoughts, and spending the night sitting by a fire and just thinking, and it's all right just to kind of be there and be yourself and be alone. That was a fine thing.
In terms of the book itself, what surprised you the most?
I think the reaction I've got, I've gotten a lot of positive reaction from it. Okay. A lot of people told me that.
You surprised by the positive reaction?
I'm always surprised. I don't want to overthink anything, and I'm always appreciative of any positive reaction. And it wasn't so much the positive reaction as people relating to different things. So it was okay. It was just nice when the book came out, and people seemed to gravitate to it. They really had good reactions, and I'm always very humbled whenever I get anything positive from work. So it made me. I was very proud of the final copy.
Right. That's okay. If you had to convince a friend or colleague to read the book, what would you tell them?
I think I would tell them it's a book of love poems. It's a book of nature poems. It's whatever type of poetry you like. It is in this book. There's sad poems. There's poems that reflect sadness, joy, love of nature, love of humankind, love of people, just love of life. And it's all there. It's not all happiness. It kind of runs the gamut of life, the day-to-day living of somebody.
All right. Share another poem, please, Jake.
Sunset. The sun breaks over the horizon, a million shards of light thrown over the field, falling in shadows that lay softly across ponds and stretched thin over rock palisades. The end of day withers like the once vibrant petals of a flower, withdrawing in wounded steps to the shade of trees. I'm left standing here, alone, understanding revolutions, composed and eager. That's Sunset from Nightfall of Diamonds.
Tell me more about that particular piece in terms of the construction of it.
A lot of times, it just kind of I hear the poem sitting by the fire, and it'll start while I'm sitting at the fire, and I hear a voice. I'll get an image. I'll start writing things down, and I think this particular piece. Sitting by the fire, looking at my grandfather's fields, he always would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, and there's a good vantage point from my fire pit that you can see the sun. So just kind of realizing that there's a day-to-day living, that every day is, you can make it as long as you want, you can make it as short as you want, and life's a short cruise, so either deal with it or do what you want, in a way.
Wow! You either deal with it or do what you want. Your thinking is really clear, Jake. It's really clear. I mean, as my mom would say, you can never put sugar on an onion, because even if it is an onion, you should never put sugar on an onion. You tell it like it is. That's what I'm trying to say.
I get it.
Thank you. I lose it sometimes.
Yeah.
All poets have several words that come up over and over and over again in their work. Words or sentences that they just can't help but use in their work. What are three of your absolute favorite words to use?
I think John Greiner, the poet from New York, from Brooklyn, he jokes around with me all the time, because he's like, man, here you are writing another poem that has the moon in it, and he constantly, and I am very, very much aware of it. But it's just something that, like, I'm writing. I'm being honest. I'm writing by a campfire, and there's this full moon floating above me. Like, this thing's gonna make its way into this poem, whether I like it or not. And I think the moon, the imagery of moon, comes into my poems quite a bit. In my earlier writing, my Lost City Highway book, the road and traveling, searching. The road was something that came up constantly. It was always, we're on to the next town. We're on to the next town. We're going here. We're going here. Where in Night Full of Diamonds, it's you're at a fire pit. You're not on the road. You're far from the road. You're secluded in the woods with a fire pit and your own thoughts and your own love, and you're sitting here. So you've got your trees, you've got your overcast skies, you've got your moon. In fact, in this book, the sun shows up every now and then, and so I've gone from writing about being on the road and having that type of terminology, hitchhikers and things like that, popping up in poems, and then now more natural imagery and natural words making their way into my pieces.
Share another poem.
All right. This is page got stuck together here. All right, here we go. Below the moon. There it is. Below the moon.
All right.
All right, below the moon. The thought of you floods my head and I'm drowning, struggling to stay above water, looking up a shimmering expanse, reminding me of your eyes, looking back at mine. But you're not here. No one is. And that is Below the Moon. Thank you.
Your poetry is short and sweet to the point. Not sweet to the point, straight to the point. Straight to the point. Short and sweet too. Short and sweet too.
Yeah.
Does knowing that your poetry is published and out there in the world validate you being a poet, or are you content just knowing they're out of your system?
I think when I was younger, getting a poem in a magazine, getting a poem accepted, that really justified the time spent writing. But now I like just writing a poem that I like the feeling of finishing a poem and thinking, I did okay on that. And then if somebody takes the poem, that's just it's kind of even more special at this point. Like, I appreciate every poem that goes out and gets taken. Not every poem's ever gonna get accepted everywhere. So I think I've learned, like, rather than when I was younger being bummed out when things didn't get taken, now it's more cool that poem got taken. Not like just knowing, hey, that poem didn't hit for that editor when they were choosing that poem at that time on that day. They just didn't feel it, so no worries about that. And now it's oh great, they really like that. I like that poem too. Or oh wow, they took that poem. I didn't think that poem stood a chance, type of deal. So I think I'm more appreciative now when poems do get accepted, but it's not a do or die for me anymore. Like, I can go without getting published. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love when poems do get published, but it's not gonna kill me if I go through a lull.
Yeah, I had a couple of rejections this week, and I almost felt crushed.
Yeah.
Any advice for me? I know you just shared a lot. Any advice for me as a poet? What should I do when that happens? When I feel like I'm on the verge of feeling crushed?
So, I don't know. The poet Joel Daly in New Orleans, He published Fell Swoop magazine, and this is one of my favorite rejection letters. So Joel published Fell Swoop magazine out of New Orleans, and he was connected to my poetry mentor that I was telling you about, Tom Weigel. So a lot of the New London, for a good run back in 2005 to 10, New London, like that poetry scene was on fire. And Joel did a New London school issue of only New London poets. Anyway, back to the rejection. So Tom was telling me you got to send some poems to Joel. So I was like, all right. So I'm feeling like, all right, Tom's telling me to send him these poems. Got a good shot of getting some of these poems in. I was young and cocky and feeling good, so I send out about 4 or 5 poems. Nothing too much. You don't want to send too many poems, but I thought I thought I sent enough that kind of showed a little of what I had. So, and I at this time I always sent snail mail. I never submitted my poems by email. Everything was hard copy. So I send these poems to Joel Daly, self-addressed envelope inside and everything, so that he's got something to send back. And I get home from work one day, and I got a letter. My self-addressed stamped envelope is right there. So I grab it, and I rip it open, and it's every poem that I sent him just folded up and sent back to me. And then written on the back of the last poem, it said, none of these poems grab me by the lapel. Cheers, Joel. And I was like, oh, my God, and I was crushed. And then, like, the more I talked to people about it, they were like, oh, that's such a great rejection. And Joel and I, we have a great relationship. I've gotten poems published in there. I've gotten poems rejected from there. And that was just, like, at the time, I was devastated. But now, like, looking back, I can say that that's my absolute favorite rejection that I've ever gotten, because I knew he read my poems, and it wasn't just a not taking your poems type of deal. It was, I read your poems and I don't like them, man. And it was just great. Like, looking back at it, I still have, I've got it in a box somewhere at home. I got to get it framed. I told he came up to New London, and I told him we got grinders in New London because he wanted a Connecticut grinder. And we were laughing about it. We had a good joke about it.
All right. I know that once I got over my initial shock of feeling crushed, then I got online and I read about rejections that people go through it. I felt a lot better. So I'm in a better place today, but I had to work through it.
and it kind of like I can't remember the name of the poet, but I know when she would get rejected, she would staple the notes or pin the notes up in her writing room, so her walls were covered in rejection notices. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And like I honestly can't remember her name. I don't even want to start throwing names out because I don't want to name the wrong person. But I just thought that was the coolest thing. And like there's a lot of cool people have done a lot of cool art with rejection notices. So almost like it's a badge of honor now.
Now, do you belong to a writing group or a group of writers that you share your work with? Or community writers?
Yeah, no, like official group, like no card holding member of whatever. But there's a group of poets that I bounce work off of. Todd Cirillo, I told you about. I'll send work to John Greiner, Victor Clevenger. John Dorsey's always open to checking out poems. But I really like getting feedback from John Greiner and Todd Cirillo. I appreciate them as poets themselves, and they kind of understand my writing in a way. So and both of them, going back to honesty, they know that I'm going to take their honest criticism, and they don't hold back. They're very they get my work, so they're very helpful to get ideas from. I have a friend who's not a writer that I send him my poems, and same thing. He'll give me feedback and things like that, like how he's seeing the poem, even though he's not a writer, where his idea of what I'm trying to say. So nothing official. Back when I was in New London, there was an issue of Fell Swoop that was the New London School of Poetry issue, and we had a good run. It wasn't like the typical school per se; like it was very loose. There was no. We would have after poetry readings. We'd have get-togethers, and we'd give each other assignments here or there. Most of the time, we were just writing exquisite corpse. Every now and then, somebody would give out like, "Hey, for the poetry reading next week, write a poem about this." But that was few and far between. Mostly, it was poets just working together, writing words together, getting published in a lot of the same places. We had New London had a big connection to New Bedford in Massachusetts, so we connected with a lot of the poets up there, and there's definitely a community. But like I said, like I wouldn't claim to be outside of the New London school, which everybody's kind of is dissipated, and everybody's kind of scattered like seeds around the world right now. There's a community. There's a pretty cool online community of poets I admire and respect.
All right. We'll take a brief break, and we'll be right back. We are back. I am here with Jake St. John. You know, Jake, so much is happening in the world. We've got the pandemic. We've got other major crises around the world. It's just so much is happening. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern-day society?
I think the role of the poet, like I said, tell the truth. And when people are telling the truth, that's going to mix society up. You're going to stir up conversation. A lot of people don't, obviously, in the last couple of years, a lot of people don't like facts. They don't like the truth. They don't want to hear it. But by speaking the truth and reading honest poems and reading poems that are painting images of what life is like for everybody in the country, everybody in the world, wherever you're writing from, poets should make things awkward, question, make people that are thinking things, why are you thinking them? Why, in the face of all these facts and science and things like that, why do you continue to think the way you are? And poetry should make you question yourself. It should open up the world. It should open up where society is. And in the end, I think poetry, if it's honest, and poetry, if it slaps you in the face, it should make people think. It should make people question themselves and really just like, this is what life is. Let's fix it. Let's make things the way they should be, because there's this potential here, and just kind of make it awkward for people. Make people think about things that they might be too comfortable in day-to-day life. They might be too comfortable to even want to spend time thinking about it.
But, Jake, people don't like awkwardness, my friend. They don't like that.
Yep. I think they don't like it. They don't like it, but it's something they'll remember when things are awkward. Like you can remember the awkward feeling, and like growing up. Like I think part of being a human is being able to grow, just like a poem. You're able to grow. You're able to revolve. Like you can listen to what somebody else is saying, and maybe you had a thought based on something else, but now these facts are telling you something different. This poem's telling you something different, and maybe you're able to appreciate that and be able to listen to it instead of having blinders up and just kind of, that's not what I'm thinking, I don't want to hear it type of gig.
All right. Please share another poem.
All right. This poem is, it's called Inishmore. That's the name of the pub I was there earlier tonight. This poem was written on the napkin just before it was my last time at the poem. It was my last time at this pub. I just got out of a divorce, and I was waiting to get to my girlfriend's house. I stopped by the pub, and I wrote this poem on a napkin, and then I think that weekend was when we kind of all went into a lockdown, and nobody, it was that first. So this poem, anyway, sorry, long story. Anyway, this poem is titled Inishmore. I'm at an Irish pub in Colchester, alone and waiting for my burger. But the bartender had my beer waiting for me when I walked in. Every so often, after kicking you in the gut for months on end, the universe relents and sees to it that you have a remedy to ease the pain. That's Inishmore from Night Full of Diamonds.
Wow. I'm just processing your work. So dynamic.
Thank you.
And your thinking, as I said earlier, is so clear. I mean,
thank you.
How has your idea of poetry, of what it is, or what it can do, changed since you began writing?
I think the biggest thing that changed in me was, like I said, growing up, my real link to poetry was Jim Morrison, and then when I got to college and got Lords and Creatures and his American Prayer, and read all these dark poems, and then Jack Kerouac, reading his work, and it's not all sunshine. And so I think early on, I took poetry way too serious. I had people there that they could find the humor in poems, and at the time, I was just man, that's not real poetry. And so I think now I'm at the point where I appreciate humor in poems. I appreciate being able to not just laugh at the poem, but laugh at yourself as a poet type of deal. I don't shy away from being called a poet. I know there's some people that that's the badge they wear. They have I'm a poet tattooed all over them. That's the badge of honor. But I don't take myself nearly as seriously as I did when I started writing, and I think that's opened up a lot more creativity, not having those doors closed and not allowing humor and happiness is a human emotion, just like sadness and angst. And so I think being able to grow and see how foolish I was, not foolish, but having my eyes strictly on a focus point rather than seeing the whole panoramic. Instead of looking at the whole Grand Canyon, I'm looking at this one tree type of deal. And I think now I'm able to appreciate the humor and the subtleties of poems can have happy endings.
Nicely stated. What makes a poem good? I know it's a very subjective question, but for you, what makes it good?
To me, a good poem to me is when I'm reading it, I can feel. I just told Ashley Cook this earlier today. It's when you're reading a good poem, you feel like you're in the room like a ghost, like you're watching the poem happen. So I think a good poem to me, it's visual, it's emotional. I think both visual, you can accomplish being visual and emotional with figurative language. I love using similes. I'll use similes all day long. But I think there's ways to make. I can read a poem, and then somebody in Wisconsin, they can read the same poem and have a similar feeling, or have a completely different feeling based on how it's written. To me, I think a good poem is, I've always said, every word should hold its own. Every word should earn its way into the poem, and if that happens, that means that the poem has been crafted, and hopefully the reader will be able to feel the emotion that the poet put into it.
We've got time for one more. Please share.
Okay. This poem is She. You, my darling beauty, are rays of the sun, cast down through all of space until you're here, right here, in this one certain point in time. And we're together by the turn of a stone. Lay down your love across my chest and feel my heart that beats for you, here, right here. And that's She, Night Full of Diamonds.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful, it really was. How active are you on social media?
I try to be fairly active. I try not to overdo it. I use Instagram to kind of focus poetry and creativity on. That's where I kind of advertise some poems, or I'll post some readings. That's kind of focused towards my poetry. But I'm active on Facebook. That's more of a you get a little bit of everything. You're going to get pictures of me. You're going to get social. You'll get newspaper stories, poetry, family, things like that. But yeah, I try to be pretty active.
Well, I was going to ask you, where can readers find your work? I know they're published on Amazon. Where else can they find your work and find you? How can they stay in touch?
They're on Amazon. I'm on Facebook, Jake St. John. I'm on Instagram, jake.saint.john. Pretty easy to find. Email jake_stjohn@hotmail. I tried any emails that come in. I always try to respond. But that's pretty much where you can find me, Facebook, Instagram.
Well, my one last question to you before we end is, what's next for you creatively?
I've talked to a couple people. Like I said, I'm kind of refilling the tank right now. But I've talked to a couple different poets about doing some projects together. I won't say any names just until they happen. But they might have a couple interesting things popping up soon. But I'm looking forward to working with some poets that I haven't worked with before.
All right, very nice. Well, I want to thank you for being my guest tonight. I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners learned a lot as well. I mean, you're a good man, and I enjoyed talking with you.
I had a blast. I look forward to doing it again sometime. It flew by.
It did. I want you to return. I really, really do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll need to schedule a part 2. All right?
Definitely. Absolutely. I am down. Absolutely.
Well, great. That makes me happy. That makes me really, really happy. Well, all right. Good night to you, Jake. Good night to our listeners. Man. As I share every week, let poetry ring. Be careful out there. Be safe.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And Make sure to catch our next episode.